Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Healing for Hot Messes podcast, a podcast for mystical misfits where mindset, mystery, and magic collide. So thank you so much for coming on, Sanhre. So just so that you guys know, Sanhre is the creator of the Order of Chaos, which is a magical order, a mystery school dedicated to the research and development of the occult sciences, and a bi-weekly podcast openly and enthusiastically discussing the mysteries of the universe, occult and paranormal phenomena, and normalizing everyday witchcraft. Sanhre is a dedicated explorer of metaphysics, the occult, esoteric philosophy, and the paranormal. Drawn to the convergence of science and magic, Sanhre's journey led to a deep dive into Hermetic philosophy, sacred geometry, ancient astrology, and chaos magic. So hello, Sanhre. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
I'm a huge fan of your YouTube and your podcast. So anybody who is listening to this or watching this right now, Sanhre has such a cool podcast with such cool and informative guests. And you can catch that either on, podcasting platforms or on YouTube. So first of all, Sanhre, I kind of just wanted to ask you to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So I practice Chaos Magick. I started as a tarot reader. I mean, like professionally. I've been doing this since I was 15 years old, but I started reading tarot professionally, I don't know, almost 10 years ago. And then that evolved into the podcast, and then that evolved into the school. And I'm just doing things as they present themselves, and I'm having fun with it.
That's awesome. And the stuff that you do is super cool. I'm not sure when this is going to be released, but like in particular, the class that you're doing, that you're promoting right now, that sounds so interesting. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of classes coming up, but the next one on September 6th is a quantum mysticism masterclass. And this is here's the thing. you hear the word quantum thrown around by like every influencer in the semi-spiritual, pseudo-spiritual space, and none of them have any fucking clue what it means, and it's obnoxious. So I'm presenting a class on what that actually means, what the quanta in quantum physics is, string theory and panpsychism, and how these concepts interrelate to create a very real magical paradigm that everyone can understand. And it's not about math. There's no math in the class. It's just conceptual. But it's trying to give people clarity on what the fuck is 5D. Like, what is that, right? What are these things that you hear all about, but no one seems to know anything about?
It's so funny. In my brain, I kind of refer to it as kind of Instagram spirituality word salad, because and I try not to judge too much other people's paths, despite being a Virgo, but it's hard when you hear that shit and you're going, okay, but like, what does that actually mean? Like, what exactly are you trying to tell people? What exactly are you trying to say? And I think one positive from that being kind of saturated in this space is I think a lot of people have learned to just tune it out, which is kind of good, because then we can actually get like your class where there's concrete answers of like, okay, so but what does that mean and how can it work for you?
Yeah, it's really important that people understand this, because these are real concepts and you can understand them. They're not even super complicated, but I've had conversations with people where I say, well, what does 5D mean to you? And there's like, it's like a higher vibration, man. And I'm like, okay. So in string theory, there's 11 dimensions of hyperspace. We live in the third, the fourth is time, and the fifth is the next set of dimensional space above ours. And you can really turn this into a very understandable spiritual concept. If there are fifth dimensional beings or entities, which I believe there are, and that's what we could call the spirit realm or the astral, then they are not bound by the same time that we are. And that's something that real theoretical physicists are talking about, but they're calling them dark matter life forms. It's just a little bit different language, but like, it does not have to be this woo-woo concept that makes everyone roll their eyes.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting that you just mentioned kind of the research and investigation that's being done in that realm, just in the land of science right now, which is very compelling, super interesting when it comes to energy or the nature of consciousness or different, like it's actually quite incredible how much is being done kind of in this space right now, and very exciting, especially for magicians kind of that have a similar philosophy to the one that I have, and I know that you do, which is sort of like magic can be this thing that marries both the mundane realm and kind of these other spaces.
Totally. And this has been going on forever. There was an experiment done in Russia in the early 90s with what they call a time mirror, and everyone thought it was nonsense. And then recently it was discovered that this was a real thing, that if you send a particular kind of photon into a particular type of mirror, it comes out with a reverse time signature, like this. And it's a concave mirror, okay? And that's exactly what Nostradamus was using to make his predictions, was a bowl of water, but that bowl of water creates a concave mirror, right? So yeah. I love the idea that these things are real, but if they're real, then we have to be able to explain them. And if we can't explain them, that doesn't mean they're not real, but we should try as hard as we can, because I don't trust things that I don't understand.
Yes. And it's very easy, I think, for people to also be overly dismissive. And then, of course, if you are overly dismissive of kind of like esoteric concepts or anything like that, you're not able to benefit from them. But then also it creates kind of like a cultural paradigm where people are afraid to practice because they're worried about ridicule. And of course, anybody that's kind of in either of our worlds would probably be a little bit beyond worrying about that. But by the same token, I think the world could be healed by more people standing in their power and believing in magic and really recognizing the power that we have as a collective and as individuals. So I love that.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest problems that we're facing is that people oversimplify, and that oversimplification, serious people will then not take it seriously. So, I was having a conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago where I was saying, at the core of this, what's really, really, really important is that you program yourself a particular way, that your beliefs are the operating system of your mind, right? Your beliefs inform your thoughts and your emotions, and your thoughts and emotions inform your actions, and your actions determine what happens in your life, right? But when you say it just like, oh, you just gotta like believe, man, like I'll fucking listen to you.
Yeah. It's not it can become unhelpful, and it can leave people not really knowing what to do or where to start in order to have some sort of practical benefit.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you, so everybody that is in the realm of like psychology or mysticism or anything like that has a story. So I have to know your story. I love asking for people's story. What led you to become a tarot reader at such an early age? What led you to kind of this quest or this thirst for knowledge?
Yeah. So it was the death of my father, actually. Essentially, my father passed away when I was 12. And I was devastated, clearly. And then I don't really remember very well from like 12 to 14-ish. I know I cried a lot. I don't know what else was going on there. But when I was 14, a friend of mine was so concerned about me because I was just like not participating in life anymore. They asked me to go to church with them, and my father was like devoutly atheist. So I was like, but at that point I was willing to try anything, right? Like I was not raised in a religious or spiritual way whatsoever. But I was willing to try anything. So I went to church with a friend, and it was a fucking terrible experience. Because the person running the church, essentially, I explained to them, look, my dad died a couple of years ago, and he didn't believe in any of this. In fact, he thought it was really unhealthy for people. And then he said something that really pissed me off, and so I shoved him and I left. And then that same day I left, I got on the bus, I grabbed my skateboard, I got on a bus, I headed to downtown Santa Cruz, and I was walking like past the metro to get to wherever my friends and I were going to go skateboarding. And I was walking past a bookstore, and it was like one of those moments where I don't go in bookstores. I was a teenager. All I wanted to do was skateboard and play guitar, right? That's all I was interested in. And as I was walking past the bookstore, it's like I could not walk past it. I had to go in the bookstore. I can't explain this to this day. Like I absolutely had to go in the bookstore. So I went in the bookstore, and then in the back left corner, they had hanging wood signs, and one said Metaphysics. Had no idea what it meant, but I had to go there. And so I went over there, and I found a whole section of books on magic and occultism. And so, okay, let me back up a little bit here. So, like I said, my father was devoutly atheist, but I was raised not to believe in religion. In fact, to believe that it was bad for people. But I was also raised to believe in Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and fucking UFOs and all of that. My dad loved that stuff. So there's this section of the bookstore that kind of is like the two put together. And so I felt much more comfortable with this than I did going to church. And I thought it was fascinating. And I spent a couple hours there looking through the books. And eventually what I ended up buying was a copy of the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey, which I believe to this day to be one of the greatest books on magic ever written. I think there's a lot of stuff in there that's like, oh yeah, okay, you know, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but not with the magic portion of it. With the portion of that book that's about how magic works is dead on accurate. And so I practiced magic right out of the Satanic Bible from 14 to 30. And when I was in my early 30s, I had a very abrupt and confrontational experience with spirit. And immediately after that, my kind of trajectory changed. And I started getting way more involved in more than just like using magic to get what I wanted. And so I started reading tarot. And then about a year and a half after that, I started reading tarot at festivals. And then I had an office at a bookstore. And then COVID happened. And then I was like, well, shit, now I don't have a job. I mean, I had a day job, but I didn't have my side hustle. And so that's when I started the podcast.
That's amazing. I don't think I knew that the podcast was quite so recent, because it's like done so well. It's so amazing. And it's been such a great resource for us. So that's very, that's awesome. So in particular, would you say that nowadays you are like a chaos magic practitioner? Like if you had to put yourself in a box, which, I mean, if you're a chaos magic, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's so funny. I'm not like big on these like witch labels where people are, you know, what kind of witch am I? It's helpful until it's not. Like if it helps you figure out the books to look at, and then you can use that as something, that's good. But then don't box yourself in. But in particular with chaos magic, like what led you to chaos magic?
So it was the book Liber Null by Peter J. Carroll. 100%. Yes. I read that book and I was like, this is it. This is the book. Yeah. But and here's the thing. We're writing a book together. We've been working on it for the last 2 years. And we disagree about a lot of stuff. And getting to know him has been really, really, really interesting, because here's like this person who when I read Liber Null, I was so blown away, because it was like my thoughts in a book. But then I took it and I kept, going in my own direction. And I realized that there's some things where we have disparate beliefs, which is interesting because chaos magic is all about belief. But I believe in a demonstrable, very real spirit realm that's explainable by science, and Peter does not. Peter subscribes to the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. I subscribe to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. But otherwise, it's the same. So I call what I do chaos witchcraft, because I'm not going to say I do the same thing that Peter Carroll does. I'm tremendously inspired by Peter Carroll, and I've been so lucky to get to like ask him questions for the last 2 years. But yeah, my practice is a little bit different, and I think that something that anybody who practices magic long enough will come to understand is that magic and music are very, very similar. So when you're first learning to play a musical instrument, like I play guitar, you're going to learn your Bach scales, and you're going to stay in the box, and the box really helps you. But then as you progress as a musician, you're like, fuck this box, I don't need this box, right? And then you just play music, and it's the same thing.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, because then you have the foundational skills where you can actually start to jam. Oh, yeah. That is such a great metaphor for that. I love that. That's really exciting. I actually was just like pumping out quotes yesterday from Psychonaut, because I'm doing another read through that book. Awesome. And it's, I had the exact same response as you did, where it's reading it and going, okay, so like, how did you crawl in my brain and figure out this like framework that totally speaks to me? But then of course, as all chaos or eclectic or intuitive practitioners do, it's like, wow, I've taken this, I love this. And now it's like become my junk drawer for all these other things. But it really is reading it, and the emphasis on things like, making sure your belief system isn't too rigid, and like having contradiction, and all of those things that in our current cultural paradigm, at least on the internet, is kind of demonized and considered to be, oh, you have to have the right opinion all the time and you have to stick to it for the rest of your life. Like, holy fucking kill me, right? So, and so brutal. brutal. And so it's funny because you can kind of view, even if somebody doesn't identify as a chaos practitioner, you can kind of view where that element of their consciousness is plugged in, where you're like, they get it, they're thinking in that kind of chaos magic way.
Yeah, and it's not too far, at least my practice isn't too far from perennialism, right? Because I do believe in a spirit realm. So I think that there's wisdom in all of religions and all of these mystery traditions. There's at least some nugget of truth in their truth, right? Or something useful to you. And what I think is fantastic about the chaos approach is that it marries perfectly to what I find to be the most effective kind of self-help or self-therapy, right? It's fucking change your beliefs. Like, one of the things I have my students do on our first day of class is write down how many negative beliefs do you have about yourself. Right now, if you can understand that your beliefs are the operating system of your mind, why are you holding on to these negative beliefs about yourself if you know for a fact that they are going to inform your thoughts and your emotions, which inform your actions, which dictate the quality of your life, right? Like, you just change the belief.
Yeah.
Change it, you know?
Absolutely. And that's why I think magic is such a phenomenal source of empowerment, because I think people sometimes it's easy to go through life waiting for someone to like give you permission or somehow hand a new belief set or a new belief system on a silver platter to you. And that's not how it works. That's a great way to piss your life away, doing fucking nothing except for complaining or thinking you have no agency or no, your will doesn't matter. And that doesn't help you or anybody in your sphere or the collective or anything. And so, yeah, belief is such a powerful tool,
The messed up thing, though, and this is a fact, is that those beliefs are handed to you. You just don't know it because they happened before you turn 7. Between the ages of 0 and 7, you absorb a worldview, and you absorb it through your parents and your surroundings, and you're totally unconscious of it. So it's totally subconscious. But it's built into you, and so to change it is not like the easiest thing. So when I say just change your beliefs, I'm not saying you can just do this on the fly. It takes a lot of practice, right? And so it's a lot like lifting 1,000 pounds. Or it's like, let's say it's like bench pressing 400 pounds. Okay, that's a tremendous goal. I can't do it, but it's not complicated. You just push really hard. And then the next day you push really hard again. And then you push really hard again until you can push that 400 pounds. But you don't have to overthink it. It's hard, but it's not complicated.
Totally. And like the thing about getting those messages from such an early age, I know you have kids as well. It's truly so mind-boggling when you see in their TV shows, or you see even just just things that aren't even, presented to them. It's almost like side subtext type stuff where you go, holy fuck, like it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's beyond just, a good example would be being 5 years old and standing in the grocery lineup with your mom and then looking at all the different magazine covers that say, from frumpy to fabulous or whatever fucking other shit. We do get it from everywhere. And I think to some degree also from the collective consciousness as well, because it seems like particularly in certain age group cohorts, they're their own sort of set of programmed beliefs and programmed this and that. And it almost seems like depending on how you were parented or raised or what happened in your life and your environment, what gets activated. Some people don't have the same issues, even though they grew up in the same culture, because they learned that, that didn't become a trigger for them. It didn't become an activator for them, it's just so interesting because there's arguments to be made for, that programming on both a collective and an individual level. And it's so pervasive. I really like what you're saying about, comparing it to working out, to bench pressing or something like that. Because I think another place where people tend to overthink is thinking that if you're trying to change your belief systems or like unfuck your programming, that it's something you have to get right 100% of the time.
Oh,
and
no.
Just
get it. Yeah, just do a little better tomorrow than you did yesterday,
Totally. And it's such an incremental steps, and it's like our culture doesn't kind of teach us or instill in us that we can say, oh my God, like I did the automatic subconscious thing. Like I just was reactive, 98 times, but twice I paused and was able to kind of counter my subconscious programming with something a little bit new. And we go, well, that's a failure. No, you had 2 fucking wins. You had 2 wins.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And yeah, it's, oh God, we judge ourselves so harshly. We live in such a we have a society that self-imposes a tremendous amount of gaslighting onto ourselves. We gaslight ourselves every single day. So for example, we live in the one and only slice of history where the entire planet doesn't believe in spirit. Like, we live in the only slice of history where atheism is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's never happened before. In fact, most of our early cultures were formed around a sense of spirituality, and now our culture is formed around this atheistic worldview. I'm going to say something that make people mad. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Please.
So, and let me explain before you just click off after hearing me say this. Give me a moment. Science is a mythology. Okay, now here's what I mean by that. I'm not saying science is wrong or it's a myth. I'm saying, what is mythology? Mythology is a way that our ancestors looked at the world and did their very best to explain what they saw happening around them. That's exactly what we do with science. It's just that we've created our current mythology, which informs the zeitgeist of our age, has decided that spirit is silly and that we can explain this stuff with physics. But then it turned out we couldn't explain it all with physics, and we kind of shot ourselves in the foot, because now we're like, oh, fuck, we're not really sure what to do here. And also, we've completely decoupled our current mythology. And again, when I say science is mythology, all I'm saying is that mythology is a way of explaining the world, and so is science. They're the same in that way. But our current mythology, again, and mythology is what creates societies and cultures, is completely decoupled from meaning, from ritual, from purpose, from stories, and you live your life through stories. That's why mythology is important, because you understand the story. Nobody understands the story of science because it's not a story. It's a set of rules. And right, mythologies usually come with a set of rules, and that's good. But we've decoupled these things, and now it's just like, here's physics, and that's the way it is, and it's boring, and it sucks, and life is boring, and it sucks.
I could not agree with you more. Could not agree with you more. Unfortunately, I think it might have cut out right when you were starting that and saying science is mythology, because I was listening. I was like, oh my God. But yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And it kind of touches on the same thing of like atheism becomes its own religion to some degree.
And the most dogmatic of any religion of all time.
Fanaticism. Like, I am talking like it's almost like those, the evangelical kind of, it's got the same sort of demented tunnel vision. And, and I used to identify as an atheist very briefly. And I kind of was like, agnostic fits a little better. And then it just loosened up from there. But it's I think there's a difference between being grounded in reality or spiritually grounded and just like, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing.
Exactly. Totally. Right. And then when you get into, and this is where I got really interested in physics, was you start to learn a little bit about string theory, and they're like, what do you mean there's 11 dimensions? There's 11 dimensions? And we're in the third one. Okay. And we're in between. And this is interesting because this is a belief that exists in every single religion on planet Earth, almost every single religion. We exist in the third dimension. There's a lower, the second, and there's a higher, which is actually the fifth, because the fourth is time. So that's why we skip 4 and go from 3 to 5. But we have an upper dimension and a lower dimension. Well, gosh, that sounds familiar.
Right?
Yeah, right. But then we also have dimensions beyond that. And the possibility of communication between dimensions is totally possible. There's an episode on PBS Spacetime about this. So just translate the language from dimensions and quantum communication and quantum entanglement to spirit and divination and communication. You're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. And I think that's why, like, for me personally, I've always found psychology and spirituality both to be so compelling. To me, they seem like two sides of the same coin. What is it supposed to achieve? Well, human beings are trying to interpret and figure out this fucking thing we call life. Like, we're just trying to figure it out. Science is the exact same thing. And it is interesting, particularly, I don't want to get on this too much because it's definitely controversial, but particularly since like 2020, we saw this this thing where it became like, the trust the science, even when, and I'm not saying you shouldn't trust science, so don't fucking come for me, people, but I'm saying the way that it was treated was not, science is a method. Science is a way that we try and figure things out and test things, and it is subject to its own flaws when it comes to things like peer review and like all of that. It became, no, this is like God with a capital G, and like, don't you question it, don't whatever. And it really, and I kind of get where that came from, because the internet really does throw a monkey in the wrench of like any sort of fucking logic or brains for our species whatsoever. But it really became this thing where it was like, this is like this, it's giving Catholicism. Like, what the fuck is this?
It really is. And with that phrase, I hate that phrase, trust the science, so much. And before y'all click off, let me just say I'm vaccinated. My child's vaccinated. I believe in vaccines. I think that there's some stuff in some of them that's pretty questionable, but like, whatever. I don't get flu shots, and I don't get the flu, but I'm not like an anti-vaxxer. I'm not anti-science.
Oh,
But scientists don't trust the science. That's not their job. A scientist's job is to distrust science and to move forward. And what science is, if you look at the history of science, is a constant reimagining of what we thought was correct before, discovering something closer to the truth that's not the truth, but closer to the truth. So science's job is to get us closer to the truth, not to be the truth.
Yes. And it seems like sometimes there's this element of digging your heels in. And we can see that in magic too. Like, there's a lot of magical frameworks where people do the same, which is, I think, why I love Chaos Magick so much, is because it doesn't allow you to do that. It's like, if you dig your heels in, then that's kind of like against the whole concept in the first place, right? Is it supposed to be a thing that's got a lot of moving parts? And it's been really interesting to see, kind of, if you look at it from a magical perspective, what's happened over the last few years, where someone can hear, I take issue with the term trust the science, when science is a method. It's not like trust the fucking, it's a different thing. But when someone can hear that and automatically think something like I don't know if I can say it on YouTube or whatever this is going to be, but they can automatically make that jump and that leap. To me, the fact that those somehow became synonymous with each other is a huge red flag for the fact that, guys, we got to start looking at things a little bit like at that programming, the programming that's still ongoing. Like, yeah, I'm not under 7 years old anymore, but we are all being assaulted by these programming campaigns, which some have good intentions, some are just to sell you shit, whatever the fuck the reason for it is, it exists everywhere around us. And I think that's partly why being an occultist or being somebody who understands magic kind of gives a little edge, because you can see the world in those terms.
Yes. And you can understand, my course, everything that I teach, if you come to any of my classes, if you do my big course or a one-off class or whatever, you're going to hear about all this stuff from a very scientific point of view, because that's how I like to talk, right? That's what excites me. So understanding left brain, right brain is so very important, right? Your right brain doesn't give a fuck about anything analytical. It wants stories and symbolism and emotions and colors. You need that as much as you need the analytical side of things. But we have this tendency as human beings to just be like full on one extreme or the other. Yeah. We don't like to be balanced. We're very anti-balance. We're just like, no, everything's got to be hard in one direction, whichever direction that may be, and it's bad for us. And so the ability, like you're saying, to just see things from both points of view gives you that balance. And all of a sudden, everything starts to make more sense. You understand that science isn't a religion, nor should it be, and that religion maybe shouldn't be so rigid, and that everyone can have their own interpretation of these things, and that we can, and this is what we do in my community, by the way. One of the things that I love about my school and my community, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to brag here. I'm just like, I love it because our rules are treat everyone with kindness, dignity, and respect. We do not have a shared belief system at all, right? We don't. Like, you disagree with me. Some of my students disagree with me. Awesome, cool. That's what we're here for. This is how we learn. This is how we grow together.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And like, it's my perspective, which is also unpopular. I think that multiple things get to be true at the same time. And I believe that, the idea of, this is a work in progress again, because, I like to feel free to contradict myself. But the fact the idea of an objective truth or objective reality just doesn't make any logical sense to me at all. And so it becomes this thing where you become very much more accepting of other people's worldviews or how other people practice, or even if you don't agree, or if you think like there's people I think are absolutely abhorrent, like the way that their belief systems of their whatever, but I can see and I can recognize they're living in a totally different reality than I am. And it's become very clear, I think, because we're so connected via the internet or whatever, where it's like we've become this large scale group of people that seem like we're in this small room together, that it's like, no, we are not existing in the same reality whatsoever, like whatsoever.
And you look at these, this is so great, you look at these in these two different directions. In one direction, you've got Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's the world's most famous science communicator, saying there's a damn good chance that we live inside of a simulation, and he's really excited by that idea. And a number of other physicists saying it's very, very possible that we live inside a simulation. If we live inside a simulation, all bets are off, goes out the window. Right. But then, because the simulation could be different for each person, like it is in a video game. Right. But then you look at this concept from Hinduism called Indra's net, and it's the same damn thing. So the concept of Indra's net is that you can imagine a spider web, and there's a drop of water on every connecting point in the spider web. Well, if you were to, shrink yourself down and look through one of those dewdrops, you would see the reflection of every other dewdrop. But if you were to then move to another one and do the same thing, you would see all the reflections, but they would look different. That's how, like, my reality is different than your reality, and our two realities are having a conversation right now. And that, I think, is the closest thing to truth that we can really get to, in my fucking opinion. But who am I? But it doesn't matter. It's just try to get to something that makes sense.
Yes. And I think it's interesting that, we have such a laser focus on finding truth, or like being right, or like having the answers, when it's like, well, if you just take that out of the equation and actually start paying more attention to like the felt experience of life, or did that have meaning for you? Like, does it matter where it came from? Like, what's that? All of that sort of stuff kind of, I think, creates more opening in our consciousness to be accepting of more things. But man, it's so interesting these days, especially when you look at the fact that, like, you're talking about that scientific concept and how it goes back. It's the same with almost all belief systems and ways of doing science, and it almost seems like we're all telling the same fucking story, more or less. The same themes, the same everything, whatever. And if you have pattern recognition, if you're cursed with ADHD, like some of us are, or any sort of like really heightened pattern recognition, it becomes more of a case of like, well, why does it fucking matter where it came from or what it's like? It's clearly something that has power, lasting power for the consciousness of our species. Should we look at that? Should we maybe give that, a little bit of credence or whatever? And then, maybe one day it's like, oh no, that's totally wrong. Cool. Throw it out and move on to something new. Like, we should always be in a state of motion, both individually for growth and healing, but like even our collective, our species, like thinking we have all the answers and just deciding to cut off any further investigation, which does happen in some sects of science as well.
It does. Yeah. I mean, people will argue with me. Something I say frequently on my show is that we don't understand how electricity works, and we don't understand gravity. These are facts. I went to school to be an electrician, and I'm not saying that to say like, oh, I know. Like, look it up, Google it. Okay, we don't know how electricity flows through wires. We have a theory called bump theory. That's probably the closest thing, but we also know that it's not exactly correct. We know what gravity is and what it does. We know lots about it, but we don't know fundamentally what it is. So if we don't know how gravity or electricity work, like, what do you think we know about anything? Electricity runs our entire planet, and gravity is the force that creates time and keeps us bound to the planet. And we don't know fuck all about either of these things.
Yeah.
And they are magic. They are a kind of magic. We use them. Electricity is just magic, in my opinion, right? It's a force that we know exists that we can utilize to get particular results. We don't really understand how it works.
Yeah. Yes. And that's why I think it's really important to just be open-minded, just as a human being, but also in your magical practice as well. Because I think humans, we tend to take a path of least resistance sort of thing. So it can be really easy for us to be like, cool, this works, and then rest back take a little lie down on the couch and be like, yeah, it's fine from now on. And it's like, well, no, you're not the same person you were when we started this podcast, right? I'm not the same person I was yesterday. So we always have to take that forward motion and recognize that. And yeah, I think it's interesting that you said that, because so many of our theories, they are like our scientific theories that we base all of our models and everything on, are theories. And it doesn't mean they shouldn't be trusted or they don't have that, like, fuck, if it works, it works. But that happens in magic as well. If it works, it works. You need to know the like mechanics behind it, or if it's working, let it fucking work.
Yes. And so to that right there, you could ask any hyper successful person. None of them, I challenge anybody to tell me I'm wrong about this. None of them will tell you, but the believing in yourself is not important.
Yes.
Or that you have to believe in your own success and your own potential. None of them are going to say that to you. They're all going to say you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your vision. You have to believe in your potential, and you have to work very hard for it. That right there, which is completely ineffable, has no, there's nothing tangible there. But if you can program yourself with these ideas that you must believe in yourself, you must believe in your vision, you have to work hard for it, you have to like never give up, you're going to be on path to success, or the most successful people who've ever lived. Again, none of them, and I'm not saying that that's a guarantee to become Elon Musk or something, but I'm saying that all the most successful people who ever lived will all tell you that that was an important piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely, because and that's just getting past some of that programming that tells us, you know, that it's cocky. Like, I know for my age cohort, confidence is a huge issue, or being cocky, or like, you know, you got to be modest and humble, and you can be modest and humble. You can both do that and be your own biggest fan. And you kind of have to, because the thing is, who's going to fucking open doors for you? If you don't energetically back yourself, nothing else is going to buy into you. Nothing else is going to have that that confidence in you. So it really is very important. And it is interesting when you listen to interviews with musicians or business people, or what, like a common theme, sports people, a common theme is visualization and just actually giving themselves a template visually in the imagination space. Like, I believe this could happen, and I'm going to create a mental model of it happening, so that I have something to, like, a North Star to work towards. But also just being open to it, which is amazing, because when you think of the average human lifespan, which is, I don't know what it is these days, but I mean, gosh, maybe 100 years is like that's a nice full one. But if you have that many years on this planet, like spending, which most of us do, spending a lot of time going, oh, well, like, why me? It's like, why the fuck not you? Because bitch, your time is limited here. Like, do what you can and then move on to the next, realm.
Especially if you have kids. Like, having a child changed my entire, of course, having a child changes everything about everything, immediately, but it continues to change. And now my son is 8. I turned 41 last week. My father died at 47 and I was 12. And so I'm really, really thinking about time. Yeah. I am 6 years away from the age my father was when he passed away. My son is 6 years away from the age that I was when my father died. It's, I don't think that I've only got 6 years left. I don't know if I have 6 minutes left. Who fucking knows? But I want to accomplish certain things. I want to do some stuff. I want to leave something for my son that my dad didn't leave for me, because he got blindsided by cancer and was gone in a minute. He didn't think I'm going to do all these things. I've made videos for my kid of me talking to him. I've got shit written for him that I've put in a safe that only my best friend has the code to, so he can actually make sure my son gets it. Like, it really makes you think about time, and the time is in fact limited. But then at the same time, there's concepts like quantum immortality, which are fascinating also, right? But it doesn't change anything, because let's say the quantum immortality is dead on correct, you will still experience the death of everyone else in your life. So time is still limited, right? Like, you never know what the fuck is going to happen. Or how things are going to happen. So yeah, anyways, I'm just ranting at this point, but the idea that time is limited is an incredibly motivating factor for me. I want to do things with my life, and I'm not going to allow myself to be weighed down by these ideas of, oh, you shouldn't, or you can't, or blah blah blah. And I'm on that verge between millennial and Gen X. and I can see it in my own life, but that what you were talking about with confidence being or cockiness being like a bad thing, I grew up with that, with all my friends calling me the confidence monster and being mad at me for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now they're all asking me, well, how do you do that? Okay.
Isn't it the most, like, this is a side rant, but isn't it the most obnoxious thing that, there's people out there that really commit their lives to demonizing things like being confident or being open-minded or being positive. That's a big one. And then at the same time, it's the same people that are going to come back, 10 minutes later and go, but like, why, how do you do that? How can I? It's like, well, you have to kind of eliminate that part of that shadowy part of you that seems to think that that's something to be demonized, instead of that's something that can be an open door for you to get the kind of things that you want in the future. There's a huge difference between thinking positively or believing in yourself. Like there's a big difference between those things and like having tunnel vision for those things, which means you dismiss everything and everybody else. And I think that's part of the problem. I feel like all I've done is like trash the internet on here, but part of the problem with the internet is those more nebulous concepts get dumbed down to a 15-second soundbite that's either like positive bad or this is bad, this is good, this is whatever, when it all is nuance, and it all is okay. So is that belief system serving you? Is it helping you? Is it keeping you stuck? Like at what point do you just go, okay, maybe I was a little bit wrong by this, like maybe I need to open up to a new possibility?
I think one of the worst things that ever happened to the spiritual community, or like people in general who believe in this stuff, is the book and the movie The Secret, because it took 2 of the 7 Hermetic principles and just repackaged them, and then left out the most important shit, and had people believing that if I just make a vision board and I just focus on the vision, it'll all just happen. No. So divine inspiration, divine vision, any sort of like spiritual connection you have, even foresight of the future, is fucking useless without inspired action. You have to work also. You have to do everything you possibly can in the mundane realm, and then put your vision board on top of that and use the vision board as a way to focus your actions. You cannot sit on your couch and manifest a Ferrari. It's not going to happen.
No. And that's what, like, it's so funny because, my own path to spirituality, like most people, most witches particularly, like starts in childhood and you kind of waffle back and forth. And then, obviously when you find something that works, and for me, it was like, oh, you don't have to have rules. It's not about being Wiccan. That's not it. And for me, I had watched The Secret back when it was big, fucking million years ago or whatever. And I was like this, I could barely even get through it. I was like, this is brutal. First of all, I don't give a fuck about a Ferrari. Like if they did that movie but was like, this is how you get land, like maybe then they would have caught me. But I was like, it seems so basic and superficial and stupid. And at the time that I saw it, I was going through my psychology degree, so I'm like, this is psychology, but you're kind of making it. But it's like they took those concepts that those Hermetic principles, and they put them in the capitalist dressing, and then I feel like the people who bought into it maybe were kind of aligned in that way, that those are the things that would speak to them.
For sure. Yeah. Some people work very hard but lacked vision and lacked the belief in themselves. And for them, boom, that is the secret. Now you put the 2 things together, but there's a much larger group of people who don't know how to work hard. And I'm not trying to be mean here, but like, no one taught them how to work hard. No one taught me how to work hard. I had to figure it out, and I failed at it for a long time. Right. And then I figured it out, and thank God that I did. But there's a large group of people who don't, and also that kind of like, I'm not like, hypercapitalism is bad. It's bad. But so is communism. They're both bad. Okay. So if you have this idea system that capitalism is evil and I shouldn't have to work, oh, you're fucked. Yeah. You're fucked. You got to work. You gotta have to work to earn money to live. That's just the way it is. So if you can work hard and work hard towards your vision and maintain the vision and be inspired, continually inspire yourself and marry that to a good work ethic and belief in yourself, now you've got the winning formula, right? But it's not this side and not that side, and it's not this side without that side. You could be a wage slave your entire life, be the best person at your job, and never get a promotion because you just don't have that thing that your boss is looking for, that spark, of creativity or belief in yourself. And at the same time, you could have all the belief in yourself in the world and do 15 fucking ayahuasca ceremonies every weekend and never go out and do any work. And you will, both ways, you're going to end up in the garbage.
Absolutely. Yes. Could not agree more. In Witchcraft Therapy, my first book, I specifically in the beginning of that was like, you're not going to get fuck all unless you do the work. What that work is depends on the belief system. Even when you look at something like The Secret, you can look at okay, if you visualize a Ferrari, say that's what you want, you visualize it, whatever, you're still not going to get it. Part of that work is going to be uncovering the belief system subconsciously that you have that is actively repelling that experience because you don't want it. People, oftentimes the things we think we want that we're unable to get is because we haven't done the work to figure out what part of us on a subconscious level is actively pushing that away. So that work can be mundane action. It can be pounding the pavement, handing out resumes, or it can be inner work of like, okay, wait a second, like all my beliefs, all these things I'm feeling, all this resistance, can we break this down? Because maybe it's all fucked up. Like maybe it's all wrong. Maybe it's not the belief system I need to get where I need to go.
Yeah. And this is why, like I said, on the first day of class, I have all my students write down negative beliefs that they hold about themselves or about the world. Right. And then say, like, now read them out loud. And a lot of times when they read it out loud, they realize how fucking silly it is.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And like,
hey,
do you really believe that? Do you really believe that about yourself? Or is that just some fucking nonsense that someone shoved into your brain when you were 5 years old?
Totally. And like when you believe it to be true, it ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the thing is, you and I could have the same interaction with somebody who says the same thing to us. If it activates something in me and it doesn't in you, you're going to interpret it a completely different way. So our brains always are looking for ways to be right. We are looking for that confirmation bias. So what you believe to be true about you is not only changing what's true and possible for you, but it's changing how you're interpreting the world around you. Like, are you living in reality? If you think someone's mad at you because they said XYZ to you, but really that's just your wounds getting activated, are they objectively mad at you? Does it actually matter if it's bringing that response up for you? All of that is like, yeah, that's your responsibility. And each person has to take radical responsibility, which, people might not like that either. That's also, these days kind of an unpopular opinion, but we have to take radical responsibilities. If you want something, fucking go try and figure out how to do it. If you need help doing it, go try and figure out how to do that. Like maybe it's reciprocity. Maybe you help someone, they help you. Maybe there's different, I love that saying, even though it's so weird, but like there's different ways to skin a cat or something like that, which I'm like, where did that saying come from? But I love it. Yeah.
I think that this is something I ponder once in a while. If you look at like fairy tales or those kinds of sayings that all came from the early 1900s, it's just a reflection of how brutal that time period was, right? Like, maybe that saying came from people who were in such, and I'm guessing here, I don't know, and I'm not going to Google it in the middle of the show, but I'm just guessing, okay, as an thought experiment here. Maybe that saying came from people who were so fucking poor that they would have to eat cat once in a while. What I'm saying? Like I don't know. But I know a lot of those stories and a lot of those old fairy tales are preparing people for the harshness of life.
It's funny. We looked up the saying, don't look a gift horse in the mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. What's that mean?
And it was funny because it was like, oh, that's what it means. It was like, if someone's giving you something, you look to see the health of the horse. It's like, well, if they're giving it to you, maybe you should just accept it and move on. But it was really interesting because I had no idea. Like, there's so many phrases like that where I'm like, oh, I wonder where that came from. Oh, it's so interesting. So interesting. So I have another question for you, which would be, if you could give anybody some advice on beginning the process of trying to find magical empowerment in that way, trying to find within themselves that element of personal responsibility, like what would be your best tips for that?
Yeah, so I would say, because this is true of not everybody, but a tremendous amount of people, and I do this in my classes. Have you ever noticed that you're always right? And almost everybody will raise their hand. And they're like, yeah, I'm so intuitive. No, I mean, I'm not saying you're not intuitive, but the reason you're almost always right about everything is that what you believe will happen is what ends up happening. Now take that as a mechanical function and point it in the right direction.
Yes.
Like, because you ever notice that people who are intensely negative lead intensely negative lives because they believe that intensely negative things will happen, and so they do. So that belief informs their actions, like I was saying, and their actions end up being, it's constant self-sabotage and then surprise that they've sabotaged themselves. Right.
Yes.
And same thing for people who are intensely successful. They really believe in their vision and in their success, and they work hard for it, and they aim it in the right direction, and they're obsessed. I think obsession is a really good thing, when it's pointed in the right direction, not when it's pointed at your ex-girlfriend, when it's pointed at your success, right? Then obsession is a good thing. And you'll notice, yeah, I'm always right. You're always right because you are creating your own reality. That's why everybody thinks that they're always right. So just understand that as a mechanical concept instead of a mystical concept, and point it in the right direction and use it like a tool.
Oh, so good. So good. Also can't relate. I don't think I've ever been right. I feel like I'm like the opposite. Like, y'all are right. It's like that meme of the guy, like, wait, we're getting it right some of the time.
Yeah.
That's new.
Well, so that's a case where I would say, like, there's something, and I know because you and I have talked about this in text over, we both have this issue where I think we know and understand a lot of this stuff, but everybody's got missing pieces, right? Like, I've got missing pieces. Like, I've got a real block when it comes to producing a YouTube video once a week. Like I say that I want to do and I'm supposed to do. And then there's a blockage there, and I'm like, I don't feel inspired by this topic, or gosh, I don't like the way the video turned out, or something, right? And I need to get past that and produce more content. But it's never, like I said, it's never easy. It's just not overly complicated. It's like lifting 400 pounds, right? Yeah. It's not complicated. I know that I need to get out of bed, come downstairs, sit right here in front of this camera, and make a video. Not complicated, but sometimes I really struggle to do it.
Yeah. So like a phrase that I use when I work with people is like, and I use it probably too much, is like, it's simple. Like, it's not easy, but it's simple, because it's, I think we think things out to be these huge, massive projects because we can see all the ways we're going to get waylaid and stuck, and the different barriers we're going to face and how we're going to get blocked. And then it becomes this huge thing when really it's like, you just sit down, you do the thing, readjust, recalibrate, just keep, like, again, you've got to keep it moving.
And it's about the way your beliefs infect your vision. So yesterday, my son and I recorded his first 2 YouTube videos for his YouTube channel. He's 8. Okay. And I watch these videos and I am so fucking proud. And like, I think they are so goddamn good. But then I make a video for myself and I'm like, this is garbage and I hate it. And I'm not going to put it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Totally. And I know that I'm seeing through these 2 different lenses, and it changes your actual vision. It doesn't, it's not just your emotions. It's like, it changes the way you see yourself and the way you see others. And so again, like, I need to take that knowledge and use it as a tool, but sometimes it's hard to do. Sometimes it's like, fuck, I'm really struggling with this.
Yeah. And sometimes we just don't have the, like the spoon theory thing. Sometimes you don't have the spoons. Like there's times where I'm like, okay, I'm going through some shit, right? Like maybe I'm not growing for a while. Like maybe I'm just going to try and fucking be in survival mode and figure it out. And then usually when you kind of come to a place where you allow yourself to have that space, like the next day you're going to feel a little bit better. It's because we don't like acquiesce and let ourselves have those moments where we're like, I give you permission to just fuck around for a little bit and not have this figured out. And that can be so relieving, and that can really create a space psychologically for us to be like, okay, so now without the pressure, what kind of person could I be? What kind of performance can I give, in my own life, showing up for myself and like the things I say I want,
Yeah. And I mean, so here's another difference between Pete Carroll and I is I firmly believe in astrology as a demonstrable, like, it's so fucking in your face, it's so obvious it hurts. And the way you were just describing feeling is how I think I and a lot of people have felt since Saturn went into Pisces. Because when Saturn was in Aquarius, the lesson was be strong-minded. And that's something I can do. That's something I get. Okay, Saturn, I'm listening. I got it. I understand. Be strong-minded, be centered within yourself. Now here we go, Saturn in Pisces. Be comfortable with your own sensitivity. fuck no, get me
Yeah.
away from that. I want nothing to do with that shit. I'm gonna run and hide. You know?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, you know, we all have our capacity and our different kind of language and our different, you know, the way that feels easy for us. And then the things that feel like an absolute full body, like, fuck no for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and Saturn in Pisces is asking us to be disciplined in our sensitivity. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is a lesson that a lot of people don't ever go through in life, and we're all going through it now. You know, and it's hard, it's rough, it's uncomfortable.
It is. Yeah, it is hard. And I think it is a challenge too, just collectively, the things we're seeing, the kind of like really just the leaps in humanity and like what we are doing without necessarily knowing, because what the fuck are we doing? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's these different layers of things that are happening collectively. And I think just on a personal level too, we're all kind of going through that stuff together. So it's a really interesting time, I think, energetically right now.
It is.
Interesting time, which is like the nicest possible way to say it.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, it's obvious to me that we are living in the Kali Yuga. Like this is not the or Ragnarok. Like these are the end times, but not the end of. It's not like the end of the world or like blah blah blah. It's just the end of the way the world was.
Yeah.
Right, and that's very true, and that's been true since the moment the internet became a thing. That was the end of the way the world was.
Yeah.
And the beginning of the way it's going to be. And we're in the intermediary phase right now where we have this incredible tool that has changed the entire world, and we use it in the stupidest, most obnoxious, worst possible ways, and it brings out the worst in everybody. And it's used as a tool to fool the masses. It's used as a tool to I mean, the greatest tool of deception imaginable, but also the greatest tool of truth and the greatest tool of sharing. And you know, people are very and this is true of me too, especially when it comes to the music and cars. I've met a lot of people who are very like nostalgic for the 80s, and I'm like, but a lot of that is because in the 80s you didn't know what was happening on the other side of the world. It wasn't your problem. Now it is. You got to think about it, and it hurts.
Yeah.
So it's this incredible tool. So it's the end of an era, right? Up until the beginning of the internet was the beginning of a new phase of humanity. It's changed us as an organism, and we don't know how to deal with that yet.
I don't think we've evolved
No.
in any way whatsoever to be able to, just from like an evolutionary psychology lens, like we have not evolved to a point that we can handle what we currently have, or that we have the skills, the psychological skills available to pick through the bullshit and to keep ourselves safe and to keep ourselves emotionally regulated and things like that. That kind of brings me to, I had a question. So I am a conspiracy theory dabbler, which means I love to partake, but I don't love to hitch my wagon to many. But I like being aware. Yeah. And it's so funny because I see some conspiracy theories are like, they're going to shut off the internet and all this. And I'm always like, first of all, if there's like a thought form, there's one of it. But like, they don't give a shit enough about us to turn the internet off. I don't think. It's just way too
and that's also not the answer, in my opinion, right? It's we have to live with it and evolve with it and learn to use it correctly. It's like the invention of fire. Okay, like it's the same level of significance as fire. The internet is fire for the next age.
Yeah. And I completely agree. It's like but it's just so funny seeing people get bent out of shape about it. They're going to do this or that. It's like, oh, come on. Like, this is toxic. And we're all partaking in it of our own free will. Like, if you didn't like it so much, maybe go away. But like, it's just really interesting. The fact that it has it, you know, even in our lifetime, transformed our consciousness, the way we think, our attention span, everything has been and the potential, there's positive potential as well, but it's definitely been such a huge leap. You know, when I think of people who are maybe older in a different age cohort, what life was like for them as a child compared to the absolute rapid speed that it's gone into now. I couldn't tell you what's going to happen in 5 years. Like, it's just in the last 5 years been so batshit crazy. I don't know what my kids are going to be into or exposed to or any of that. So it's very interesting.
Yes, it is. It's wild. And it's, you know, the devil in the tarot, the devil card. This is something people one of the many cards people get wrong all the time. So the devil is not the toxic person in your life or the toxic thing in your life. The devil is your addiction to the poison, not the thing that's toxic. Yeah, the internet's toxic. Put you down your phone.
Yeah, totally.
Or whatever,
Totally.
like you need the discipline to that, and by exercising that discipline, that's how you inform them, right?
Yes.
Stop looking at the bullshit and they'll stop producing it. Like
Absolutely.
this is how I feel about Disney Star Wars. Stop fucking watching it and they'll stop making terrible Star Wars movies. Don't go to the next movie thinking maybe this one will be good. It's not going to be good.
Totally. And that's
they change the direction.
And I think that's a really great analogy for mindset as well. So if something is, if a belief system or a way you're thinking or the way you're doing things or having to keep yourself in these rigid boxes of certain rules or whatever, if it's not working for you, look somewhere else. Our attention is our currency. That's a very powerful thing. And it's a very important thing. And it's, doesn't have to be a scary or frightening thing. It can actually be super empowering when you go, oh my God, this, what I pay attention to has such meaning and such value. So what am I doing with that time? What am I doing with that space mentally? Yeah. I just love this stuff.
And so getting to conspiracies, like you were saying just a second ago, you know, the one that really pisses me off, and it's like, I have to look at myself because I'm like mildly triggered by this. It makes me so mad. But when I see people going off about the them, the they, they're doing this to us stuff, and it's like, you're participating in it by posting this.
Totally. Absolutely. My husband's theory is, I love my husband's theory, which is like, do you think that there's a them that is that able to communicate and coordinate? Like, have you looked around? Have you learned anything about history or humans or like power structure? Like, hello.
The Illuminati, I know that the Illuminati is a real thing. Don't get me wrong. I know that there are organizations, blah, 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 blah. But the real thing that I think people are pointing to, the them, the they, the is the collective consciousness.
Absolutely. 1,000%. Yes. Yeah. That's definitely what it is. It's just and that depends on what cohort they are in energetically too. What reality are they living in? What, you know, frequency, what sort of, what's the energetic signature of the bandwidth that they're on, and who's on that with them, and what's their echo chamber kind of consisting of. So it's very interesting that. So on that note, my last question for you, Sanhre, is what is your favorite conspiracy theory, cryptid, or high strangeness topic or story? It's a hard one, right? Because it's like, oh, your answer could change every 5 minutes.
Okay. I love thinking about aliens, and not just in extraterrestrial life, but interdimensional life, which is something that I talk about and teach about. I think that the idea of spirit and the idea of extraterrestrial are much closer together than people realize. So maybe even when we're seeing things like UFOs, those could be interdimensional craft, not planetary craft. You know, so yeah, thinking about life outside of our frequency, out of our perception, is the most fascinating to me, and it's one that like I feel like I understand very thoroughly, but at the same time I'm blown away by it constantly because I practice mediumship, I teach mediumship, I read tarot, I'm able to communicate with the recently deceased, I'm able to communicate with my father through tarot cards. But then there's like the alien aspect of it too, and I'm like, these are just different kinds of the same thing probably, and it's wild because the spirit realm, or that like the next dimensional level up, the fifth dimension, is again like same thing where people have this idea of the age of Aquarius being this like, oh, it's all happy. People have this idea of the spirit realm as this, it's all so beautiful and happy in 5D, man. Like, no, the spirit realm is like the ocean. There are some beautiful, incredible fish, and then there's fucking monsters, and they're both out there.
Yes. And within.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. The alien thing is definitely a source of fascination. I was listening to this old interview, an Art Bell one last night with someone talking about how, you know, the invasion's already started and and I was like, I love this. And I listened to a talk recently by Mitch Horowitz on aliens and mythology. And he tied it in with, the spirit model and with like things like goblins or elves or thing. And it really is truly very fascinating. And I kind of wonder how it's going to play out for us. My prediction is this is going to play out in a almost more dramatic scale, just because of the fact that it's very heavy on a large number of people's consciousness that maybe wouldn't otherwise have had an interest, because it has become so big. It's getting its own energetic boost just by how many of us are looking at it and attending to it. So I think it's really such an interesting topic.
It is. And there's last thing I'll say about this is there's a kind of a way to reverse your thinking about this that I think is a fascinating thought experiment. So a lot of people got really excited about the idea, like watch the show Ancient Aliens, which I fucking loved. I know some of it's like wacky, but I love that show because there's good stuff in there too, right?
So good.
But so everyone's like, oh, I see. So what angels really are, the things we thought were elves and angels and all that, they're actually aliens. Like, try it the other way around.
Yeah.
Maybe the things that we've been calling UFOs and aliens are actually what we knew as angels and dwarves and elves.
Yeah,
totally. Like, reverse your thinking about that just for fun.
Yes, yeah, because it can be both ways. Like, it can just be this thing of like, okay, so we, because obviously what our language is and what's in our consciousness at the time is how we're going to interpret it and how we're going to see it, which is why we get those totally batshit weird descriptions of like, Ezekiel's wheel or what, like if you had never seen a spaceship or whatever, how would you explain it? So we're always to some degree limited by our perspective of what reality is, of what truth is. Oh, I love that. Okay, so Sanhre, how can people find you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So www.theorderofchaosmagic.com. That's magic spelled with a CK. You can find me on Instagram at The Order of Chaos. I think I have a TikTok. I think it's at The Order of Chaos. I don't post there very often. I think the same thing. I think I have a Twitter, but I don't go on there. It's a fucking dumpster fire. So Instagram is a great way. Just look up The Order of Chaos. There is a weird old 80s metal band called The Order of Chaos also, but I think you'll probably find me. And yeah, we'll throw a link to my shit in this video. I take it, and people will be able to click on that. Yeah. Just totally. Come find me.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, and have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. This is awesome.
So this is the part where those of you who are watching this on video are going to pretend that I didn't just awkwardly jump cut to a completely different location. Let's call it magic. So today's episode was brought to you by Touching Grass. Seriously, if y'all go outside, there's a lot of shit going on out there, and it is pretty fantastic. And I wanted to also let you guys know that there are a few ways that you can support my work if you are a fan or if you like what I do. Number one, I have a group called Hot Mess Coven. It's $7 a month. There is a resource library. We have a private Facebook group. We have a group chat. I do Q&As in there. Sometimes I do shadow work and dream work clinics in there. So be sure to check that out if you want to work with me a little more closely in a group setting, and support my work at a low cost, low price point. But I also wanted to let you know to check out my website. I have, some new books coming out. I have my shadow workbook coming out in October. Super fucking stoked for that. But I also have a variety of courses, classes, programs, and one-to-one and reading options with me if you kind of want to do something with me that's a little more personalized. I love and appreciate you guys so much. Be sure to leave me a comment or something so that I know that you're enjoying what I'm putting out there. If you have any suggestions of things that you want to see, I view this as kind of like a collaborative effort. So heads up for that. Have a great day, and I love you.